I'm going to mute us.
Sure.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kirk Mote. You are on with the one and only Tim Smith with Heart Certs. I am the founder of Rescue Site, and today is going to be all about live Q&A for CPR instructors just like yourself. We have committed actually to doing this every month until the end of the year. So the first Wednesday every single month from here to the end of the year, we are going to be here answering your questions. Now, before we came to you live, we decided to, send out some, emails, send out some posts, and some of you submitted questions. We are going to get to those questions in just a minute. But before I do, let me tell you a little bit about myself, who I am, what I do, why I do it. and then we'll have Tim do the same thing. So about 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to listen to a Holocaust survivor give her testimony. During that testimony, an elderly gentleman stood up, shuffled his way over to the door, collapsed, and died of a heart attack. No one knew what to do. I had previously been trained in CPR, so I went to work, barking out orders like, call 911, go get the defibrillator. By the time I got the man's shirt off, an off duty nurse joined the rescue with a defibrillator. She put a pad on, I put a pad on. Long story short, after multiple breaths, compressions, and yes, shocks, the guy lived. Now, I went home that night kind of like reliving the scenario. Tim, I'm sure you can imagine being the first time ever going through something like this. Okay, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What could I do differently? Did some soul searching. I did some Googling as well, and I found that, hey, this is not an isolated incident. In fact, heart disease is the number one cause of death in the world. And oh, by the way, 80% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests happen at home. That was my catalyst event to become a CPR instructor, and I'm sure everyone on this call has a very similar story. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about yours?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an amazing story, Kirk. And thank goodness you and that nurse were there and that people knew what to do. That's why we do it, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. My story, I was a firefighter. And as a firefighter, I was also an EMT in St. Paul, Minnesota, and did CPR out in the field. And I just started to see a gap that, man, there's a lot of people when we respond that just they don't do anything before we get there. And that chance of survival just really, really plummets quickly. And so I decided something needed to be done. And so I made it a mission to start training my community and getting out there. And I would literally have people come one on one into my living room in St. Paul, Minnesota to just do CPR, and word got out and it just kind of kept growing, and everything I could, I just put back into the cause, into the mission, into the business, and has grown. And this is what I do full time now, is trying to save lives through training.
Tim, I love that, and I think so many people have that catalyst event or that the family member that had a situation that got you, looking and doing some research, doing the googling, right?
Got to do the Googling.
Got
Yeah.
to do the googling, and when you realize, hey, this is not an isolated event. When you realize that, hey, this heart disease, cardiovascular disease, is the number one cause of death in the world. Why aren't we talking about this more? And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got to become a CPR instructor. I need a defibrillator at the home, at the office, at, community group, church, whatever that looks like. And so I think it's super important as CPR instructors, because a lot of times, I'm sure you've seen this, Tim, CPR instructors are really good at teaching people how to save lives, but the business side might be lacking a little bit. And because that's not what a lot of us went to do in school. Right now, I went to school for business, and that's like I eat and drink business. I love it. I geek out on it, and I'm sure you have a little bit of that too. But a lot of times, there's a lot of CPR instructors that are like, man, should I have had a contract? I mean, I just got canceled on the way I was setting up, and they told me, like all those types of things. And these are types of questions that we'll answer. These are types of questions that we'll dive deep into throughout the year. But today, the first question is from Nicole Kent of Boardman Pool and Recreation Center. And she says, tell me how you make the CPR portion of the lifeguard course fun and engaging for young adults.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that I think every CPR instructor kind of has to deal with, cope with. We all have our own ideas and thoughts on, well, maybe this video or this portion of the video could be a little better, or this or that. And it can be tricky, because obviously you've got to stay within the guidelines, the rules, the standards, and we've all heard it, right? If you tell war stories, that's probably not the best way to do things. So I will say this, what I've noticed over the last, so I've been doing this about 11 years. There's been several guideline changes in that time, new videos, new books. I personally feel like they're all getting better. And something you need to keep in mind, or that I try to make sure I keep in mind as you do this more and more and more, the videos certainly seem extremely repetitive and almost boring to you, right? Because you see them all the time. But remember, your students, they don't. So continuing to stay within those guidelines is important. But then other ways, yes, we do. We want to make it a good experience. We don't want to be those people who just press play, walk away. That's not what's best for anybody. So really finding a way to engage your class and engage your students. And that can look a lot of different ways. What I always try to do and tell my instructors to do is really get to know your students. And I'm not talking 20 minutes, half hour, just quick, if you know from their registration or registration form or quick introductions. Who are they? Why are they taking the class? What's the reasoning? What's their why? And then when you're talking through things and doing scenarios, tailor that to the audience. That will get them engaged. That will, if there's somebody who works at Target, use that as an example in one of your scenarios. Or if they're in a hospital, and you might have a diverse group. And so you'll have to just do different scenarios throughout the class. But the classes, whether they're blended, which we'll get into, or full classroom, there's lots of time in there while following the guidelines to engage your students. And don't be afraid. Like I said, war story is probably not the best way, but I always find statistics throwing in there, like Kirk just mentioned. If you find relatively reputable, or not relatively reputable, but reputable statistics, that usually is an eye opener for people. And I've heard other things too. Each audience is going to be a little bit different. Some instructors might hand out candy to try to keep them engaged. Hey, if you answer this question, that's one thing. Or little games. I always try to make sure the biggest thing is knowing their names, knowing why they're doing it, and then trying to tailor what they're learning to their experiences. So that's been my experience. It can be tough, but keep in mind that what the content is, and that it is the first time they've seen it or first time in the last 2 years. I don't know, Kirk, what's your viewpoint?
Yeah, so I love the candy idea. I like handing out lifesavers. How
Yep.
appropriate. The
Yep.
little circular mints, especially as a lifeguard. If you're teaching other lifeguards, I mean that's a perfect candy to hand out. As far as getting to know them, knowing their name, knowing why they're taking the class, and that's huge. I just went to an event this past weekend. Speakers like John Maxwell were there, Jesse Itzler, and a whole host of incredible names. You'd probably recognize all of them. And one of the underlining things was the fact that you should be transformational over transactional. The idea that success is great, success will come if you focus on your significance, like impacting the person that you're teaching or impacting, whatever that looks like in your life, your community, your family. So, I mean, making it fun. Yes, you definitely need to kind of, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the scene from The Office, right? Like, what do we do now? We harvest the organs, right?
Yep,
I mean,
exactly.
that's a fun way to, like, everyone's seen that scene, right? So, like, it's a fun way to kind of, break from the seriousness of the fact that we're talking about someone's dying or dead that we're going to revive, right? And having a nice, balance between the seriousness as well as a little bit of humor, because that helps everything click. And when you tell a story, people remember that story so much better, and the feeling that they received while you tell them that story, then allows that information that you're teaching them to sink in that much more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, if you're going to tell stories, I would keep them on the shorter end, but that is exactly what people recognize. And then there's different props and things too you can use. You can maybe go above and beyond what just the basic core level of the course is, right? And you can have different mannequins that have different functions. There's, mannequins now where you can display up on a screen how well people are doing. You could make that into a competition, into a game, right? You can do things like that. If it's a first aid class or first aid's incorporated into your CPR, you can have actual props that people demonstrate or use moulage, things like that. Just get creative. But the biggest thing is, be personable, get to know them and engage them. And you're always going to have some students that you're just not able to quite break through, but we just do what we can, right?
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening here and you know a CPR instructor in your network of friends, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, do me a huge favor. Hit that share button wherever you're watching it from, because I guarantee you there's a CPR instructor that you know that needs to hear the information we're talking about today. As well as, if you have a question, do not hesitate to use that comment section. Type it in. We'll get those questions answered live. But as we continue, Tim, you did mention blending. And so can you kind of tell us a little bit, what is blending learning?
Yeah, and I've noticed that that's kind of a common question that comes up, not only from the student aspect and the customers, but instructors also. It's blended learning is a lot, it's what it sounds like. So the learning doesn't take place all in the classroom in a blended learning uh, course. It'll be taken the didactic portion online, and then they come in for skills and hands-on training. So the same videos that you're going to show your students in a 4-hour class, they'll get to see those videos online ahead of time. So then when they come in, it's really more focused. It's hands-on skill training, doing some practice, and then doing testing scenarios. And so it looks a lot different than a classroom course. And it's got advantages, and from a business aspect, there can be some drawbacks or considerations as well. But that's the big thing, is blended learning is just a different option for getting certified. And today's day and age, it's really nice to have those options.
Love that. And so, as far as, let's say I am a business owner and I need to get several people certified in CPR, what would you say is some of the big differences between your typical, sit in a class, do the whole, 9 yards, right? Or versus, doing some online, and like, what are some of the advantages that you can, I guess, communicate to that business owner, that decision maker, trying to decide between, hey, let's just do full classroom or let's do it blended?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, everyone learns differently. There are some people who are always going to prefer the classroom option, and that's fantastic. And there's others who prefer, for whatever reason, maybe they're just more experienced or they learn a different way, that they prefer to just have that more focused time and they learn better on their own time. So, understanding again the audience, the students, will help you direct that decision. A lot of times for a corporate client, if they have multiple employees, like you were saying, it might be better to go in and just have it all done at once rather than trying to track down and ensure everybody has done the online portion, because that is part of what the class is. It's required to do that blended portion, the online learning. So they watch the videos, they take interactive tests and quizzes, and then when they're done with that, it's time for the hands on. So, really making sure you understand that audience would be the biggest thing for that question.
Love that. So, as far as agencies are concerned, like, what agencies can you do this for?
Yeah, that's a great one too. And a lot of instructors I have reach out and ask this. So, who can I do this for, and who can I do it with? And really, the answer is pretty general and broad and straightforward. You can do blended learning for just about anything and for anybody. So that's from lay responder or heart saver courses all the way up into the advanced courses, ACLS and PALS. There are blended options. For American Heart, they call it Heart Code, where you buy the online portion and then the student is able to watch it and then come in for the skills. So, American Heart, Red Cross, ASHE, I know they all do blended learning, and you can do it for any of the disciplines. So, it's an option for anybody if it fits in to your model and into what the student needs.
That's awesome. And I do want to give a quick shout out. We have Patrick and B listening live. Thank you for joining us. And we do have questions coming in the comment section. So we'll get to those in just a moment. How do students access the online portion of the class?
Yeah, and this is where it can get a little bit tricky and can throw off both students and instructors. So it depends, of course, on the discipline you're using. Is it American Heart? Is it Red Cross? Is it ASHE? But you have to first get the access to the online content to your student. And there's a couple of different schools of thought on how to do that. And I've done it both ways. I've seen a lot of instructors who will say, all right, sign up for your class. This is the in-person skill session that I talked about. And then they'll make a note to the student or email or call them and say, hey, just so you know, before you come, you've got to complete this online portion. And so you kind of put it onto the student. The advantages of that are you don't have to pay for the online portion. You don't have to track it. You're kind of putting it all on the student. There's no extra costs or anything to you. And what's nice with the blended learning from an instructor standpoint is the courses are shorter. So whether you're doing them yourself or you're hiring and paying employees or contractors, there's definitely an advantage there. So you can send people to American Heart or Red Cross or ASHE and have them start that component. Or what you can do is purchase it up front, have that, and then pass that cost on to the student. But then everything is bundled together and you roll it all out to them. So that's actually my preference. What I've found is that you got to give consideration to the number of touches and how easy or not that something is for a student to get into your classroom and to get certified. If they have to come to a website, register for an in-person, then go to a different website, register for this, and then get sent to a third one to, find a link and get in and do the online stuff, you can lose people, or it can be just not the greatest experience. So there are ways where you can buy them up front and then issue them out to students. That's really the two basic ways. Either have the student do it or you do it. And you'll have to figure out what's best for you.
I love that because you look at your Apple phone, right? You look at apps, how they're designed, how they're developed. And what I'm correlating here is user friendliness. Okay. And so Tim's
Huge.
point is, if it is so hard for my client to, make it happen, you could just put that as part of your process to do as much as possibly that you can do for them, so that all they have to do is, as little as possible to, reduce the friction that could potentially cause them to walk away or wash their hands of this, or like, you know what, this is too hard. I'm not going to waste my time. So,
right. Or not come back next time too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would highly encourage, think if you were the person taking it, and the information that you received from the company, your company, right? So like put yourself in their shoes, like reverse the roles for a second and be like, okay, did I send enough information out? Is it really spelled out?
Did I send out too much?
Or did I send out too much? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm sure everyone, it falls one side or the other, right? I mean, and there is a happy medium, right? There is a sweet spot, and it's different for everyone. But if you can figure out what that sweet spot is, let me know. I want to know too. But there is a sweet spot, and so make sure that you're sending out enough, but not too much. And super important to make it as user friendly as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the challenge I think that some instructors face with that, especially if you're new or you consider yourself small or starting out, is that any cost or any expense when you're not getting paid for it up front is tough. Right. Like you said, Kirk, I mean, you geek out on business stuff, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like me, I didn't. I was a firefighter, knew nothing about business. I was just like, hey, I know CPR like the back of my hand. Let me start a business. And you are 1,000% right that being good at a task does not necessarily equal being good at business. I'll be the first to tell you, when I opened my business, it makes me cringe the way that I treated finances and everything else. I learned over time and thankfully made it successful. But yeah, you really got to button down on certain things.
You're exactly right. And there is a blueprint, by the way. There is, a way that you could leapfrog where you are today to where, Tim is, right? There's a way to do that because, we've been there, we've done that, we've figured it out the hard way, but now we have the process systems and, in place that allows us to be able to share them with you guys and say, hey, look, we're not perfect. We don't have the perfect solution, but we have a solution that has worked for us. And you could probably, piece something that I do, something that Tim does, something that someone else does, and figure out your recipe that works really well for you. And that's what the whole purpose of, live Q&A for CPR instructors every month, first Wednesday of every month. That's what we're here for. We want to, show up for you every month and in between there. So like if you have questions that you need answered immediately, we'll handle that for you guys. But I'll go ahead and
I
put
wish I
this.
had all these resources, Kirk. I don't know about you.
I
When I
know.
first started, I say it all the time. And then just to finish the thought on when you're starting up, where it's like, man, this is an extra expense. Think of it as an investment, and it's small. Like an online blended key code, I think currently is like $32.50 for BLS. You don't have to buy 100 of them at once. If you are confident and you have written out your goals and plans, and you should already kind of have an idea, well, I get like one student a month or 10 or 12, you're going to get paid for that. And heck, you can even upcharge for it. I think people will pay for the convenience and do pay for the convenience of doing blended learning. A lot of people have pricing questions, and that's maybe a whole other podcast thing that we can get into. But convenience and valuing your time and investing in yourself and your business is huge. So my suggestion to people would be, just like Kirk said, minimize those touches, make it a good experience from beginning to end with as little touches as possible, so that it's seamless, flawless, just a nice experience for the student. So go ahead and invest in a couple of key codes and see how that goes.
I couldn't agree more. Tim, we have a few questions, rapid fire, for you. So, does AHA still have renewal classes?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, this comes up a lot. They do. There's not a huge difference anymore. For those who've been around for a long time, there used to be very large differences in timing as to a renewal class and an initial class. And now this will, of course, vary on discipline because we have lots of them: American Heart, ASHE, Red Cross, and there's others, National Safety Council. The biggest thing is to make sure you check the instructor manual and then also the videos. But yes, like for BLS, ACLS, there are renewal courses you can do, but there's still the same main content in there. But things are always
Excellent.
changing.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. Because that's the question we get a lot too. Um, Question about payment. Should I collect payment up front?
That's an awesome question. I love that question. A lot of people have tried a lot of different things, and I'll just give you my viewpoint. When I first started, I thought, no, I'm not going to collect payment up front. Sign up just with a simple form because it's simple, it's easy. Show up, I'll collect payment then and there. What I came to find was that people who don't pay anything up front, there's not a huge incentive for them to come. Yes, they want their card, but I just don't feel all that great today, or I've decided I'm going to run to the store. You might have a day planned around classes and then nobody shows up. So I 100% think, in my opinion, that it is best for you and for your business to collect payment up front. Again, everybody does things differently, but your time is worth something. You've got to make everything seem right. And you don't go to the store and get a gallon of milk and pay for it later, right? I mean, you got to pay up front for these kinds of services. So that's my opinion. But there's also, like, what if I'm going to an on-site client or a corporate group, like you brought up an example before there, Kirk? They're not going to all pay individually. So you might want to collect a deposit or send an invoice afterwards, or just invoice them afterwards. And that's part of customer service. But then you got to kind of understand your cash flow.
100%. And like to the point of the corporate clients, I would say yes, not all clients are going to be the same. And some might be a net 30, 60, or even 90.
Yep.
I've seen that before.
Me too.
And so what happens is you have to do a cost analysis. Hey, can I float this much money for this period of time? If the answer is yes, and it's a client that you want and you want to keep it and retain it, then maybe you have your answer. But if the answer is no and you have to have the money up front, here's the thing: it's always good to have policies such as collecting money up front, because guess what? As the business owner, you can now make the exception And I always put that in my verbiage, by the way. If we have something that's standard, if we have something that has been communicated to the client many times, so that's a verbal, that's written, and again verbal, and and they still ask for an exception, it is up to you now to say, you know what, I'm willing to make the exception in your case, and you let them know that, hey, this is an exception that I'm willing to make for you. But it gives you the leeway so that you don't have to be so hard nosed that no, this is the way, this is the only way. You have to pay me up front. But when you're able to say, hey, I'm willing to make an exception in your case, they feel really good about that. They feel, man, Kirk just made an exception. Tim just made an exception for me. Go to HeartStart, go to Rescue Site, get your training from them, right? And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Have the policies at bare minimum, knowing that you can always make the exception if necessary.
Absolutely. Having policies in place. That's one of those things that makes me cringe. I talked about when I first started that I think a lot of newer instructors probably don't have, having things set. So, when this question comes up, that's the answer. And yeah, you can make exceptions. Absolutely.
Tim, the last question, and we're going to head on out, is what do I do if I do not have a physical location?
Ooh, yeah, that's tough. I didn't have a physical location for years, but there's lots of things that you can do. So one of the first things is to focus on those corporate clients, like Kirk and I were just talking about. Focus not so much on the onesie twosie people, but hey, I want to go out into companies and do it there because that's a service that they're looking for. They don't probably want to send 10 of their employees off the job site for the day to do a class. You bring the stuff there and do it for them. That's a great starting place. And I know several successful companies that just primarily do that. So that would be a great starting point. Me personally, with my business, I've always seen that as, there's two roads, but they're kind of parallel to where I want to get to, is that going for corporate clients, but also the community. That was where I started. I really wanted to train people. So I used my living room. I don't recommend that. But there are community resources that you can use. And a lot of them might be free and some not. And then I would put the ones that are not into that same category of investing in yourself and investing in your business. You do not need to buy a building or have $1,000+ lease to get going. You can utilize churches, gyms, YMCA's, other community centers, places like that will oftentimes let you use it for free because it's a public service that's helping the community. Libraries is another one. And if they won't let you, it might just be a small fee. And if not, then go on to the next one. But there's definitely options out there because, as we know, to teach CPR, you don't need a whole lot as far as a space, right? You just need some empty floor space. Some tables, chairs would be nice, and a bathroom. But I've taught in some pretty crazy places, and yeah, you don't need much. It's there if you just start looking and doing some reaching out in your community.
We've done free community CPR classes in the park. We've done
Yep.
them at the gyms. I think Tim mentioned gym earlier. Another one is hotels, and this is really cool.
Mhm.
Traditionally, you're like, man, a hotel, they're going to charge me a ton of money just to have a conference room. You're right, but guess what? If you know how to time it right, then you can time it, and that's actually towards the beginning of the week, Monday through Wednesday. Things aren't going on. Thursday through Sunday, that's where prices you see go up on hotels, as well as you can do the barter system. Hey, I would love to certify your staff at cost if you allow me to host, a class right after this, or at this date or whatever. And man, I tell you, like they love that because that brings people into their hotel. Now they're buying food at their, Starbucks inside the hotel. They're buying, drinks at the vending machine, whatever that looks like. It's eyeballs, it's people inside their facility. So use a barter system. It's a big thing. So I would highly recommend, don't let a physical location hold you back from growing your business is the biggest thing I
Absolutely.
could say.
Yeah, the barter system, that's fantastic, Kirk. I mean, but the thing is, you've got to make them aware of that too, and make sure
Yes.
that you're vocalizing that anytime you're using a space, it is totally a win-win. It's a win for you, for your business, right? But you don't have to lead with that, but it's a win for the community because you are training people who can help everyone else. And it's a
Huge.
win for the business regardless, because just like you said, Kirk, you're getting people in their doors. Even if they don't
Yeah,
buy anything, they're now more aware that, oh, this business exists. I've been in there. It's just one of
exactly.
those things that, hey, now I can do it. But if you're going to barter, make them aware of that. Because if you just say, hey, I want to offer CPR classes and have them come to your hotel conference room, they might be like, nah. If you're like, we can generate this much more traffic for you, you got to be able to sell a little bit.
Again, I mean, and honestly, I love how you use the word sell there, because people hate the S word. They're like, "Oh, you're a sales guy," and it comes down to having a really big vision. Hey, my vision is to create a world where no one dies from sudden cardiac arrest. That's huge. That's massive. I can't do that by myself. If you have a big vision, then you know that someone needs your service or product, and it will help them out more than it would hurt them. Then it's not a sell. It's the next logical step that they should take. Same thing with that barter system. You don't have to sell when you are going from the transformational rather than transactional. Dude, you're talking to a hotel manager and saying, look, I'm so passionate about teaching people how to save lives that I want to use your hotel as the front for this community every Saturday in the month of February, which is Heart Month, by the way. Like,
Yeah,
start.
absolutely.
I mean, start talking. I mean, we're doing this with gyms this month. We're going out. We're doing stuff with gyms, and we're making sure that the community, knows us, sees us, and we're helping out. So I
We'll
would
put your
highly,
logo on the flyers that we're
yeah,
putting out. We'll put your
huge.
logo on our Facebook and social media.
If you don't have a Facebook page, you need a Facebook page for your business. Make sure it's a business, not a personal. And the reason why, you can share, your personal, your business on your personal. But I guess what I'm saying is, when you have a business, you have certain things that you can do, like creating events. When you create events, you can actually have co-host, and you can make that event venue, whether it's a hotel, a gym, or whatever, a co-host, and that's marketing for both of you guys. It's huge. So I would highly recommend doing it. February is a great month to kick it off. And so I'll leave you with this. We are out of time. This was an incredible jam-packed, half hour. In the chat, I just posted it. This is the link. If you have a specific question about what you're going through and your industry, like, I want to say industry, we're on the same industry here, but in your specific geographical location, throw it in that link right there, and we'll start compiling a list of those questions for next month. And next month is going to be starting at 3:30, okay, on March 2nd, 3:30 Eastern.
Yep.
That is 2:30 Central if you're in Minnesota. Did I say that right? No, I
Yeah,
said
you
that
got
wrong.
it.
And then 1:30 if you are on Pacific time. So I hope that this was a jam-packed session for you guys. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out directly to Heart Certs Rescue Site. Either one of us would love to answer your questions between now and March 2nd. But until then, be great, and we'll see you soon.
A lot of fun, Kirk. Thanks. We'll see you next month.
All right.